Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to this month's Intentional Success webinar. Today we're going to reconnect cost, price, and profit. Um, as it says, before you can price strategically, you need to manage smartly. And before I can have a pricing discussion with you or a profit discussion with you or even a cost discussion with you, you have to know what the other two things are. So we're going to talk about how all three of these things relate together. I'm going to run you through an exercise that I think you'll enjoy to illustrate it, but it won't be from the AV industry, but I'll tell you how to apply it to your industry so that you can make better use of what we're teaching here today. I am, of course, Tom Stimson, your presenter and host. I'm a business consultant in the AV industry. It says I work with owners and management teams for companies with 5 to 5,000 employees to improve results and create intentional success. Of course, I wrote that myself. And we have to give a shout out to the sponsors. These are the folks who are helping sponsor the Jumpstart workshops that we do quarterly and the AV Matters newsletter. These are folks that are investing in your business education and making sure that you have the knowledge that you need to be more successful at your business and then continue to use their products and services. So please pay attention to these names, look for these companies, find opportunities to talk to them, maybe do some business with them, and I think we'll all be better off for it. Now, why are we doing this webinar? What is this webinar all about? Well, I'll tell you what, I spent an awful lot of time answering questions about pricing. Pricing pretty much consumes us. And the lack of confidence that I find we have in our pricing is remarkable. And it's only contrasted by people who are extremely confident in their pricing. So I don't really see a lot of middle ground here. Either we don't think our pricing is working, or we're not confident in it, or we just think we're the only ones in the world who know what we're doing. And those two scenarios play out against each other and really muddy up the marketplace. I think that pricing is 80% math and 20% instinct. Many of you are using it the other way around. You're doing a little bit of math and a lot of instinct and gut feelings trying to figure out how to price something. So there's some methodologies that we can apply. These are some business fundamentals. There's a tendency in our industry, since most of you are production rental companies, you're producing shows, you have a rental inventory, and your market prices for the rental side of your equipment and even your labor side of equipment are somewhat arbitrary. A lot of it's based on feelings, and well, that's reflected in your bottom line, which is how I get to make a really great living. And I appreciate all of you for that. So before I get too deep into our topic today, I want to remind you about the journey that we're all on as business people. I monitor 4 stages of business. I have clients in every one of these stages. The beta stage, we affectionately call the startup stage, but I have some very old beta companies, or companies that have a lot of beta qualities to them. Beta companies tend to be reactive. They tend to come up with solutions on the fly. 1.0 companies start to codify things. They start to put people in place. They develop maybe their first org chart. They define processes and talk about how processes work and focus on that a little bit. 2.0 companies become a little bit more process oriented. They start to document things, and they also start to plan and predict in order to be less reactive. They start to do budgets. 3.0 companies have pretty much total control over their business processes. They're constantly improving, and they have control over their trajectory. They can decide where they want to go and point their energies there and execute accordingly. So they have a lot more options at their disposal. Yeah, sure, they're a little bit reactive sometimes, but they react much more nimbly, much more quickly, and they are applying existing processes and personnel and skill sets often to do it. So 3.0 is our goal. Not many companies actually make it there, but that shouldn't stop any of us from trying. Now, when it comes to pricing, the reason I present this is that the people who seem to be best at pricing are the beta companies and the 3.0 companies. And I started thinking about this and going, why? Why is it? Well, beta companies are great at pricing because they have to be. I mean, they've got to move their capacity. They have available capacity. They need the cash flow. They need the revenue. They're very open-minded about pricing. They look at the market. or look at what the competitor is charging or what the client wants to pay and say, can I cash flow that? Can I work with that? Can I keep the doors open another week? Absolutely, we'll take the business. And as a result, they have an intuitive sense about pricing. 3.0 companies, well, these are methodical people. They've looked at the marketplace, they've planned, they've budgeted, they know what pricing they need to have in order to make the money that they have budgeted. They also know when to break that rule. So they're very good at that. 1.0 companies, well, we're building kingdoms and silos and we're trying to control things and we try and control pricing, which if we don't understand it, we tend to take on these arbitrary rules about, well, this is the price of this thing. Here is an acceptable discount. Or we create these job costing models where we think we have to have 50, 60, 70% gross profit in order for a job to be profitable for us or practical for us. 2.0 companies do the same thing, but they become a little bit more sophisticated in their pricing burden models, and they create these sophisticated methodologies for justifying why they're not going to sell a job that would help them cash flow in reality, but on paper, they make it look unprofitable. So there's a certain amount of dysfunction that we gain while we're trying to become functional in 1.0 and 2.0. And the sooner we can nip that in the bud, the sooner we can get people to understand that pricing is a skill set, it's a discipline. It is 80% math and only 20% feeling. The sooner that we can grasp that, the more time we have to focus on the other things that will help move our businesses along. So you've heard me say this before, and I'm going to say it again. Your pricing is made up. And in fact, it's actually irrational. Most of us start with fuzzy math on pricing. We come by it rightly. We're particularly in anything that's rental based in our industry. Most of our math is pretty fuzzy. We do things like we confuse job cost with profit and loss. In other words, we're trying to create a P&L statement on a project when in fact, that's not how projects work. Projects' job are to deliver gross profit, not net profit. And when we start putting overhead costs into job costs, we're fundamentally misunderstanding what job cost is. And that's going to affect our view of what pricing needs to be. And then we're going to be in a hot mess. And then leveraging price and value, another reason we struggle with price is that we're not very good at negotiating. We don't create proposals that allow room for negotiation, and our only recourse is to sell on price. And that's really difficult for us because we need to sell value, not sell price. And selling value is hard. I mean, give yourself a break. It is hard work. And that's why I do spend a lot of time talking about how do we sell value? How do we sell the what instead of the how? How do we convince the client or demonstrate to the client that we're 10% more valuable than our nearest competitor? Therefore, if they want good work, they should hire us because we're 10% better, but we're only 10% more expensive. How do we have these conversations? Different webinar, but an important aspect of why we have so much trouble with pricing. And then there's the whole aspect of fear. And a lot of our pricing dysfunction comes from our fear. Now, when you're a beta company, the fear is actually good on this topic because it drives you to make cash flow choices. So you quickly look at the amount of cash that's left over after the transaction is done, and that's cash that will pay for your overhead, it will pay your rent, that'll help you make payroll next week. And that fear is very, very healthy at that point. 1.0 companies, the fear drives us to actually sell on price. So we sell on the price and we're not paying attention to what the cash flow is. We're competing on price. Our competitors are selling on price. Therefore, our customers are buying on price. And we just jump on the bandwagon because we're still pretty reactive. Now, 2.0 companies, fear will cause them to shun profitable business. And I will tell the story again. I've told it before, about the client of mine who had a lot of excess capacity, but they refused to lower their pricing in order to get it. They had these arbitrary rules about how much gross profit every job had to generate to be worth their while. And then they had an additional rule that said, well, if the project's not is less than $5,000, we're not interested in pursuing it. And as a result, they had excess capacity, but they also had excess demand that they weren't reconciling it. So we came up with the process, which is called job cost analysis, to help them to develop a true cost basis so they could see the value of the profit that they were actually getting out of these jobs. And the net result is that they started taking a lot of jobs that they would have not taken before. They dramatically increased their growth rate, and they generated, while arguably a lower gross profit percentage of revenue, significantly more gross profit because they were selling so much more revenue. So, fear will keep us from doing those things. We need to acknowledge the fear. Fear is good, but fear is also bad. So at the end of the day, we want to win the right jobs, we want to lose the wrong jobs, and we want to keep repeating that process over and over again. So wrong jobs are typically defined in this discussion about pricing and cost and profit. Wrong jobs are the jobs that you're going to over deliver on. In other words, you're going to give them more than what they were paying for, which is going to increase your costs. And in fact, over delivery doesn't have a scope of work. It never ends. Once you start over delivering, what's to keep the client from asking for more and more and more and more? So part of understanding how all this works is to understand the relationship between over delivery and profit. So if you have to over deliver to meet your own standards at the price sold, that's a wrong job. Now, winning jobs that are winnable is not brilliant. I mean, winnable jobs are winnable jobs, right? So protecting your margins will steer you away from wrong business. Now, right jobs are they're inherently profitable jobs. They tend to be infinitely scalable. There are no pricing subsidies. If they add labor, we will make more money. If they add gear, we'll make more money. If they extend the length of the job, we'll make more money. All of these things should incrementally increase the value of the job, the gross profit you're going to generate. That's what scalability is all about. But how do we do this? So the 5%, 5%, 5% rule. You have a lot of 5%, and sometimes it's a 1%, sometimes it's a 10%, but you have a lot of percentages in your business that you can leverage, that if we just leveraged a few of them, we're going to get much better results. So the first 5% is higher price. If you charged every client, you won't do this, but if you charged every client 5% more and didn't lose any business in the process and didn't over deliver or add any delivery in the process, you simply charge them 5% more, you will make 5% net profit. It's just math. So if you show the client 5% more value, which means they will pay 5% more, but you don't spend any more money to deliver, you will make 5% additional net profit. And then if you utilize your resources better and get 5% more utilization on your resources, in other words, sell one more job, you will add 5% to your bottom line. So by focusing on your cost, focusing on your price and your profit and your value proposition, you have a lot of 5% that you can leverage into more profit. Now, we're not going to win this way on every single job. We're not going to get 5% more out of every client. But if you don't ask, you won't get anything. I'm working with a client this week. I've had three people in the organization come and tell me stories about, we raised our labor pricing. And yeah, we had a lot of one-time pushback, but at the end of the day, nobody changed their mind. Nobody took their business elsewhere, and nobody said another thing about it. So a lot of our fears about raising prices are unfounded. We're dealing with what you all know, because you've listened to many of my webinars, are single level objections. And when the client says, "Oh my God, you raised your labor rates," your response is, "Yes, we did." And then you move on, because there's really nothing else. The client's not really objecting. They're just acknowledging the fact that you have raised it. If they come back and say, "Well, I don't know if I really want to pay more," then you say, "I understand that. Our costs have increased. These are our new prices." And that will take care of 99% of the objections that you're going to get from customers. It's a single level objection. Have a reasonable, non-defensive answer. You get to move on, and as a result, you make more of the money that you deserve. So a lot of times I talk about making more money, and I'm thinking, why aren't you making that money now? Let's work on making the money you should be making. Then we can worry about making more money. So that's enough about our industry. I want to talk about something else. I want to talk about beef jerky. This is beef jerky. I love beef jerky. I make my own beef jerky when I can, but when you go to a farmer's market or a craft fair or something like that, and you come across a table that's selling beef jerky, I'm there. I'm stopping, I'm tasting it, I'm asking how they've made it, what are their ingredients, and I'm probably going to take some home. So I was at a market with one of my daughters one time, and stopped by this table, young vendor, seemed to have a great recipe. I tasted it, said, hey, this is really good. Talked to him a little bit about it, but he did not understand pricing. Here's what I mean. His 6-ounce bag, which is a fairly standard size bag, that's 2 snacks or 1 snack for me, was $15, which is not unheard of. But 2 bags was $28. There was no real price break there. And then 3 bags was $40. And I'm talking to the kid. I'm going, I realize that all he's thinking about is the retail value of all the product that he brought with him in the trunk of his car, instead of thinking about the profit he could take home if he thought about profit instead of just about price. And I tested this theory. I asked him, I said, look, I normally, if you're selling a 6-ounce bag for $15, I can usually, I'd usually buy 2 for $25, not $28. I said, and in reality, you'd normally get 2 for $20, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And he's doing some sort of calculus in his head. And I'm saying 2 for $25, 2 for $25. And he's having to think really long and hard about taking my $25 and going home with $25, or holding out for somebody who's going to pay him $3 more. He eventually took my $25, but I knew he didn't understand it. I knew he didn't get it. I know he felt like he was getting taken advantage of, when in fact, I'm the one who was getting taken advantage of. I was just being a good sport about it. So if his cost had been $10 a bag, well, then he was probably underpriced. But more than likely, and because I know this product, because I know how to make it, his product cost was probably only $4 a bag if he was just a regular craft person like me making beef jerky. So we left. We had our beef jerky. My daughter was asking me questions because she loves to talk about business. And she says, help me understand what it is that you were trying to get him to figure out. So I do what I do. This is no surprise. I have a huge whiteboard in my office, and we went home and we mapped it out on the whiteboard. And this is kind of what it looked like. I said, here's the deal. His cost was $4. His retail is $15. He's asking for a minimum of $15. He's asking retail for his price. If he sells it, he's going to make 73% gross profit. He's a rock star if he can do it. If you buy 2, he's making 71% gross profit. He's not really giving up any margin. If he sells 3, he's making 70% gross profit. It's imperceptibly difference in margin. And I said, let's just assume he has a quantity 10 price. If he was following his same theory, he would want to charge $125 for a quantity of 10, which is insane. So let's run his scenario. Let's say in his average weekend, he makes beef jerky all week. He goes to the markets on weekend. On Saturday, he does a market. Saturday market buyers actually tend to go out and buy fruit and vegetables and produce and stuff for their home. They're restocking. It's not just a day trip. They actually go out there with a purpose and they buy more. So he would sell 50 units at an average price that would yield $700. He's got a product cost of $200. The booth costs him $250. He has a net profit of $300, which sounds really good. He made $6 a unit. Life is great. Then he comes back Sunday. Sunday's a different crowd. It's the strolling after church crowd. People are more lookers than buyers. He only sells 30 units. Well, if he made $300 on 50 units, he's going to make some money on 30 units, except his product doesn't scale and his pricing doesn't scale. So in fact, he's got the revenue, but he's still got product costs. He's still got a booth cost, and he's making a net profit of $30, which is $1 per unit. Now, that's what he's thinking when he's trying to hold up his price in front of me. but he's making $4.13 per unit over the weekend. So he blends Saturday and Sunday sales, and he's not doing too bad. He's making $4 a unit. If it only cost him $4, he's making 100% gross profit. It's not bad, right? Now, so let's say our young man goes back and he analyzes his results from that first weekend, and he's going to have a couple of facts that he needs to consider. And I'm asking you to consider the same things about your business. It takes as much time for him to sell one bag as it does 3 bags to the same customer. You know in your businesses that it takes you as much time to do a $500 rental as it does to sell a $5,000 show. It takes as many phone calls, as many pricing revisions, as many, revisions. We all intuitively know this. So this is a consideration. Another fact is he has excess product. You have excess capacity. And the third fact is that his profit per unit doesn't scale. In other words, if he only sells 30 units, he's almost upside down. If he sold 20 or 28 units, he'd have lost money. Right? So the decision that he needs to make and should make is to maybe adjust the quantity price to drive some more sales. So he makes some adjustments. So he comes back the next weekend, remembering my request and saying, you know what? I need a better break on quantity 2 and 3. If I can sell somebody 3 pieces, I might lower my per unit profit, but I would sell more units. And oh, by the way, I have excess capacity. It's just sitting in my trunk, right? So he comes back and he runs the model again, and here we go, right? So he sells 100 units on Saturday. Great day. Has $1,100 of revenue, $400 in product cost. His booth cost $250. He made $500, an average of $5 a unit. Awesome. Sunday, he sells 50 units instead of 30. His net profit is $135. He's making $270 a unit, but his average return per unit is $423 for the weekend. Remember, it was $413. So he's not actually making any more money. So he changed his bundled price. He turned his 1 bag buyers into 3 bag buyers because, hey, for $10 more, I get 3 bags. He did generate a profit, but he's also only making $600 a week, which, is not really a living wage, is it? So now he's thinking again, as you would be thinking, how do I get even better value? So he's going, well, should I drop the Sunday market? I don't make any money at Sunday. Should I hire somebody else to do another Saturday location? How many times have you thought, well, if these 2 shows were not on the same day, I would make more money? Well, that's exactly what he's thinking about right now. So that's the 2 scenarios he's thinking about. Drop the Sunday market, hire somebody. It adds costs. He's got to pay that person. It would increase his net profit by $200. He would still sell out of his product at $425 a unit, but his risk goes up because now he's got somebody else selling for him instead of having control over it himself. And he acknowledges that his sales on quantity are easier, but he's still spending too much time to sell a single. So if they only buy a single, it's still a huge amount of time. So what can he do to actually improve all of this? So now we're going back onto weekend 3. He's really thinking like a business person now. He's thinking about his costs, he's thinking about his pricing, and he's really focused on profit. So here's what he does. He raises the price of a single bag to $20. He doesn't believe for a moment he's going to sell a bag at $20. He might sell a few. Trust me, there are retail buyers out there. Instead, he creates a discounted price of $15, and the price for getting the discount is tasting the product. Stand there in the booth and taste the product. So now you're helping him market. And if you do buy the product afterwards, he's going to ring a cowbell or make some other ruckus to draw attention to the fact that you just bought a bag. Now, if he's really good, he'll also probably convince you to upsell. He'll upsell you into buying 3 bags, but that would be extra. The point is, he's still spending a lot of time getting a single sale, but he's getting extra value out of that sale. So he's running a special, taste my product, get a discount, right? Now, here's the outcome. Now his $25 for 2 bags looks like a huge discount. Its gross profit's still pretty darn high. So the retail price is now $40 for 2 bags. You can get it for 25, or you can get 3 bags for 30, which is half price. As a consumer, I'm going, man, this stuff is good. I'm going to buy 3 bags. I'm going to spend 30 bucks. He's still making 60% gross profit. At these rates, he might even sell some quantities of 10. Great success. Great. So he has Saturday. He's selling 160 units. He's got all this revenue, $2,300 of revenue. Product costs $640. The booth still costs $250. Your rent doesn't go up when you do more business, does it? Okay. The booth is still $250. He made $1,400 on Saturday. It's $875 a unit. Now let's go to Sunday. Sunday, because now we have people who weren't motivated to buy, really hadn't planned on buying, but who wants to pass up a great deal, or now he's selling 100 units there. And if he sells 100 units on Sunday at these price points, a nice mix of price points, he's going to make $500-600. He's making $590 a unit on a 100-unit sale. His average return per unit on the weekend is $7.65. I think he was at $4.23 before. So all he did was changing his marketing. He just changed the price and made the customer feel like they were getting an even better deal. You follow me? Now, what's happened here? He had this great weekend. Now he realizes, now he's really thinking about a businessman. Because if we go back and see that he sold 260 units and he only produces 200 a week, so he had excess capacity from the previous 3 weekends that he hasn't sold, but he's going to run out of material. So he buys another dehydrator, and he buys a commercial dehydrator. It costs him $1,600. He can now produce 500 units per week. He now buys beef in a higher volume. He dropped all of his material costs a little bit. His new unit cost is about $3 a piece. Now he can afford to hire a helper, and they do 4 markets each weekend. It's worth the risk because his cost has gone down. So he has one guy who does Saturday and Sunday at 2 different markets. He does Saturday and Sunday at the markets he's been doing it. So he's making money. Now he's making money quite substantially. So instead of a $2,000 weekend, he's now going to make money closer to $3,500 a weekend after he pays his helper. You following me here? He's understanding the 3 things that affect his ability to make profit. He's selling excess capacity. He's doing all the things that he needs to do in order to make more money. Beautiful. Now, if he's successful, his competitors might drop the price. If his competitors drop their price to $10, he could match them and still make money. Or he could not match them and have a better product. And then one more thing happened to all this. He's got this excess capacity. He may not want to do a show every weekend. Winter is coming. He starts selling to wholesalers. Wholesalers, he can sell them at $6 a unit, $3 cost for 500 units, and make money without even going out. He can make $1,500 without even going out on a trade show. So he's figured out his business model. He can now scale it. He can buy more dehydrators, make as much product as he can, sell it in other towns, other markets, find more wholesalers who go sell it, put their brand name on it and go sell it. And all of a sudden he's on Shark Tank talking about his business. You're probably thinking, well, Tom, this has nothing to do with my business. And I'm thinking, yeah, guys, it has everything to do with your business. If you add marketing and salesmanship, which means understanding the customer's relationship to price and value and expanding your market, you can do more business. You need to add marketing and salesmanship to everything you do. That's how you support your price. You need to understand your cost and control your costs. So if your average profit unit is a key performance indicator, use that, but use it wisely. Don't just measure the jobs that have 70% gross profit because they were add-on jobs. Measure all of your jobs together. And your different markets, your different products and services are going to have different KPIs. Understand what they mean. So let's apply this to something that you guys might be familiar with, which is, say a freelance graphic designer. So here's 4 freelancers. right? Fred, Tina, Seth, and Mary. Fred charges 30 bucks an hour. His design capabilities are marginal. He's not particularly efficient. It takes him 100 hours to do a job that somebody else can do in 50. When he estimates the job that he's looking at, a 100-hour job, he wants to charge $3,000 for it. The market says that that particular job, in this example, happens to be a $2,000 job. Now, who would buy from him? Somebody who's shopping on price, looks at the $30 an hour and buys from him, not realizing that they're going to spend more money for subpar work. Now, Tina's a little bit more efficient. She looks at the same job. She goes, I can do this in 60 hours. My work is better, so it is worth more. She does charge more. A value shopper might look at her and say, hey, you're more efficient. You do better work. I can get more bang for the buck buying from you. Now, Seth has got the market down. Okay, he's efficient. He does really nice work. He takes his time. The market value in his price are pretty much in line. So he's a very low risk hire. But Mary is the veteran. She does fantastic design work. She's super fast and efficient, which means that she could estimate lower hours. So her pricing estimate is the same as Fred's pricing estimate, but her work is 3 times as good. Who's going to buy from her? It's going to take a discerning buyer. Now, without looking at their work and understanding who they are and their value propositions and looking at their portfolio, you might look at these 3 things and hire Tina, and you're going to get Tina's work. You might think Mary and Fred are the same because their estimates are the same, and you're going to miss this. These people need salesmanship in order to garner the rate that they have. And I can tell you from personal experience, I've worked with all 4 of these people. I've hired all 4 of these people. I only work with Mary's now because they end up costing me less money and I get better work out of it. Let's take another example that's you're going to be familiar with. Okay? An event RFP. So 4 companies bid on this event. Company A's cost is $1,000. Company D's cost is $2,500. Everybody's cost basis is different. This is very important for you to understand when you're pricing, that your cost and your competitors' costs are not the same thing. Sometimes people can undercut you on price because their costs are lower. Sometimes they undercut you on price is because they don't know how to do math. All you can do is present yourself, understand your costs and your value, and present that to the customer. So we got these 4 companies. We have the same execution qualities. For the buyer, when they're evaluating the proposals that these 4 companies come in, they're looking for fit. Are they aligned with what we're looking for? Do they meet all of our criteria? Do they own the gear we want them to own? Are they experts where we want them to be experts? And company A is 50% alignment. Okay, they're not really well aligned. Now, somebody might buy them if they're only shopping price because the price is pretty low, and that company will make a good profit, but they may not be good at doing the work. Company B is priced for maybe for a control value buyer instead of a value price buyer, but the work again is just okay. The alignment's pretty good, but if I wait for a little bit better alignment in company C or company D, I can do really well. So company C, perfectly aligned. They're meeting our RFP exactly as we asked. Their price seems fair compared to company B. It's only a little bit more. But when we look at the company, they're actually making less money than company B does, but they're more attractive if you want good work. And for a lot of our industry, this is what we see. The companies that you think are overpriced are making less money because they're doing better work. Now, that company might be because they're 100% aligned, they do good work, they seem to be priced fairly. That's going to be attractive to a value confidence buyer. If you guys are all familiar about my system of categorizing buyers by how important confidence, value, and control are to them. And people always have at least 2 qualities in place, so a value confidence buyer might be attracted to them. Now, company D is 120% alignment. What does that mean? That means that they are over-delivering on the RFP. They're giving more than what was asked for. Okay? Now, over-delivering does what to your gross profit? Look across the lines there. It wrecks your gross profit. So they may do super awesome work. Their costs are much higher. You know, clients are looking at their proposal going, man, this is everything I want and more, and their price is the same. Why wouldn't I hire them? But the fact is, company D is going to go out of business long before company C does, or even company B. And we're not even sure company A is in business right now. So think about where you position, what your costs really are, what's the value proposition you're trying to sell, and you price it accordingly. You can't win all jobs. Remember, quoting on something and not winning is not the same as losing a job. You only lose a job once you have it. The other company won it. The question is why? In all of these examples, the other company won because the customer was buying what your competitor was selling. If they didn't buy from you, it's because you weren't aligned well enough with what they were buying. So again, it's not always price. There's some other subjective qualities that are going on in there that the customer is considering that we have to take into account when we're looking at our business. Which brings us to the discussion of internal versus external cost. If you're in a business where you only sell your capacity and you never go outside of your company, if I'm a freelancer, all I have to sell is my time. I can't double book myself. Therefore, my internal costs matter. So if I only have a limited inventory, if I run out of inventory, I don't run any more, then my internal costs matter. And that's all I have to look at are my internal costs. And anything above that in terms of revenue will generate more profit. However, most of you are in the business of exceeding your capacity. Okay? You're going to do things like sub-rent equipment, hire freelancers, okay? In which case the external cost is what matters to you. So when I talk about cost being extremely important, we have to think about that in context. There are times when internal cost matters, but for most of you, internal cost, if you're on this webinar today, chances are internal cost is irrelevant to your profitability until you've sold the job. When you're pricing a job and figuring out what a job is worth, internal cost is a subsidy. You need to be focused on external costs because that's the replacement cost. When you run out of capacity, here's the price that you have to pay. Let's make sure that you can make money on that. So replacement cost becomes your estimate cost. Now, there are circumstances where you need incremental gross profits, which means even though your external cost says that this job is worth $2,000 plus, I might be willing to do it for $1,500 because all I have are internal costs, in which case I can make a strategic decision to sell below cost. Again, this is how companies are able to sell below cost because they're simply selling cash flow. It's $1,500 to cover expenses that you would had to have paid for anyway. But again, in order to make that decision, you have to know what your external cost is and what your internal cost is in order to move forward. So some of the conclusions from this, besides the fact that I would really love some beef jerky right now, is your cost basis, the cost that you should be using when you're figuring out your pricing and negotiating with your clients is probably higher than you think it is. The inventory on your shelf is not free. So you have to figure out how to cover that cost. However, knowing that cost, you could sometimes take less money from the customer because you have excess capacity, but you still have to follow the same process. Replacement cost matters more often than not in most of your businesses. Now, when it comes to costs, you always need to work on them. You can always sub-rent for less money. You can always control your labor costs better. You can do a better job of billing change orders, better job of accounting for things, recovering expenses. All of that is working on costs, which are things that you have to do every single day. Another conclusion I'd like you to understand is that your perception of value to the customer is probably much higher than you think it is. Fear reduces price, but it doesn't reduce your cost. Fear also reduces your perception of self-worth. Customers think much more highly of you than you think. And if they don't, why should they buy from you in the first place? So sometimes you have to stand in front of the mirror and say, I'm valuable. People like me, and go into that meeting with that confidence that there is value in you. Reduce that fear, address that fear so that you can capture the costs, get the better pricing, and therefore make the net profit you're trying to make. And then when it comes to looking at the job cost or looking what a particular job can deliver to you, the margins many of you are trying to achieve are irrational. They're based on a unique set of circumstances that you cannot guarantee every time. If we put a blanket statement out there that says every job has to deliver 50% gross profit or we don't quote on it, that's an irrational statement. There's no basis in that other than the fear that we don't know what things really cost, so we have to make this much money. So a good margin for many of you might be, 40, 30, even 25%, depending on the business you're in. So a lot of the measurements that you're currently using are somewhat inaccurate. So think about those measurements, go back in there and look at them differently, recalculate your cost of labor, okay? Because your labor probably costs you more than you think it does. Think about who are direct costs. Just because you classify it as an overhead cost on your P&L doesn't mean it's actually an overhead cost. It may be a direct cost, in which case you're subsidizing your gross profit by not charging cost of goods sold for something that is cost of goods sold. And I see this quite a bit. I see project managers listed as overhead when they really should be a direct cost, which means we're giving away free labor on a job and not accounting for it. So we're not all there yet. So what do you do? What are your next steps? And be thinking your questions, because we're getting close to Q&A time here, and I'd love to answer a few questions for you. So what can you do? What can you do after this webinar that might help you better understand how to apply the things that I've just talked about today and sell more beef jerky, right? Review all of your pricing, okay? Blended pricing is what scales. If you get hung up on an individual price, you're gonna price yourself into a corner. If the customer wants to think they got the video projector for half price, let them think it, because all that matters to you is what is the blended price at the end of the day. And I know many of you are worried about precedent. Oh, if we tell the client that that price is less, they're going to expect it next time. Again, that's a single level objection. Our way of dealing in that is better salesmanship. So again, we can sell more smartly, we can sell honestly and say, look, I can give you a great deal on it this time, but that's not the deal I will give you all the time. And that's part of what being a salesman is all about. In general, you need to make more money on people and accept less on product. Many of you are protecting dangerously high revenue numbers on product. We don't want to discount, we want to charge you for everything, but you're making no margin on people, which is extremely unscalable. Look at making more money on people. You should be making 30 or 50% gross profit on labor, but that means you can accept much lower gross profits on products, particularly rental products. Think about positioning your value. So not all buyers are seeking the same value. Some people are price shoppers, and that may not be your ideal customer, in which case make sure you're positioned so that they feel out of place buying from you. Now, many of you have no choice but to pursue whatever business comes your way, which means let's go back and watch the marketing webinars. Let's build a bigger pipeline. But you have a lot of fronts that you're fighting. Yeah, we got to build a bigger pipeline. We got to market. We got to get our brand out there. We have to do business development. We have to keep our pricing intact. We have to control our costs. We got to keep our overhead down. Welcome to business. This is what we do. This is our job now, right? So if you understand the importance of everything that I'm talking about today, but you don't feel really equipped to do it, then that's a reason for us to have a conversation. Give me a call. So I'll be happy to take some questions here, and I will come back to the questions in just a second while I do a couple of quick pitches for you and a couple of housekeeping notes and updates. The first thing is I've got a great 20-minute call that could change your life. If you've got a business goal, you want to understand what's holding you back or slowing you down, you want to see if we are a good fit together to help your business, let's have that conversation. I invite you to that conversation. I have some slots for coaching clients starting at the beginning of the year. Actually, I have a couple slots that could start earlier if you're anxious to get started. But it's an interview process. And while you have to make a decision about hiring a coach or hiring an advisor, I've got to make decisions about hiring customers. So let's have that conversation. Let's see if we're a good fit, because you and I may be missing an opportunity to work with each other. So remember, teaching is all about learning. Coaching is about unlearning the things that hold you back. Let's work on those things together. Next month's webinar, we have, I'll talk about Jumpstart Workshop on the next slide, but my new tradition is on the months where I do a Jumpstart Workshop, I think it's a lot more fun if we have the open Q&A webinar like we did in August. We had a great turnout. We had some great questions. So we're going to do it again in November. You can email me questions in advance, or you can ask live, and I'll get to all the questions that I can. We probably covered 15 or 20 questions last time. It was a blast. I think everybody had a lot of fun. I enjoyed the heck out of it. And it requires surprising little preparation on my part, which is also a bonus in a busy month like that. So let's see how good I am on the fly for you. And there's no question I won't, and there's no business question I'm not willing to answer. And speaking of business questions, November 11th, 12th, and 13th is the next Jumpstart Workshop. Our topic is management, and we're going to focus on intentional success. So I'm looking for the owners and senior managers of your business. We're going to talk about what management's job is, how to apply vision. We have some great guest presenters to talk about leadership. These are people from the industry. I've got Jeff Day here. I've got Craig Jansen from Adibri. Some great thought leaders in our industry are going to come visit with us. We're going to talk about money. I'm going to do a lot more math exercises and take you through some stuff to help you understand how to look at your costs. We're going to do what we did today, but we're going to do it in real time and use non-beef jerky examples that I think you'll appreciate and you'll be able to apply to your business. So great content coming up on that. I'm very excited about this upcoming workshop. Again, another shout out to the sponsors here. And let's look at, I've got a few final thoughts, but let me answer a couple of questions before we go today. Don't all ask at once. All right, thank you, George. So the question here, let me get this position. So what if we don't do any marketing, no brand awareness, no client engagement, but expect more from our salespeople to get more clients and greater profits? Well, all right, what if? Well, George, that means that you're normal. That's like 80% of the businesses in our industry. But it is also unreasonable. You can't expect more from your salespeople for more clients and greater profits without making the investments in the marketing and brand awareness. Here's what happens if you don't invest in marketing. You have to hire more salespeople. And believe me, the ROI on a salesperson sucks. So if in your business, the typical regional AV production rental company, a really high producing efficient salesperson might only manage $1 million worth of business a year. So if I have a $5 million business, I need 5 of them, but they're not all that efficient. Some are only doing $500,000 a year. So I might need 6 or 8 people to do that. If I add marketing and brand awareness and outreach, client engagement, lead capture, attracting the right kinds of customers, I can dramatically increase the amount of volume the lower performing salespeople will have, because the business is coming to them and it's business that fits really well. So my goal is to have, 1 salesperson who can handle $1.5 million and 4 who can handle $1 million. And all of a sudden I'm a much bigger company without adding salespeople. Or I can continue to add $500,000 a year salespeople who are costing me, $75,000 a year with benefits, which is not very, very scalable. So I know you're asking that not because you don't know the answer, but you want your boss to know the answer. and there it is. Tell them to call me. I can show them in great detail what the long-term ramifications of digging in their heels on this really is and all the opportunities that they're missing. And trust me, it's a lot more fun on the other side when you have customers who come in and understand what you do, what your value is. Way more fun to sell to those people, the people who feel like you're pushing sand up a hill. So thank you for that. Another question here. In estimating costs, are you saying that all labor, including staff hours, need to be included in cost of goods sold? Well, yeah, absolutely. Staff hours matter. Now, sales hours don't matter. Sales people are always going to be overhead. They are cost of sales. I don't mean to sound cruel or unfair. I don't care if salespeople have to work 100 hours a week. They should learn to be more efficient. But in terms of direct labor, if I'm putting technicians on a job, I have people doing drawings on the job. These are all direct costs that I would not incur if I didn't sell the job. So those are a part of your cost of goods sold. I use project management as an example. In many of your systems, project management is also part of the selling process. You use project managers to build estimates and respond to RFPs, and so that the salesperson can build a budget and present it. If that's your model, then typically I would say half of my project management costs are cost of sales below the line. The other half are cost of goods sold. They're delivering on the show that was sold. Other than that, everybody else is pretty well cut and dried. All your warehouse people are cost of goods sold. Your drivers are cost of goods sold. All of your technicians are cost of goods sold, even when they're not working. And in fact, if you build your P&L correctly, or my version of correct, which let's face it, it's right. It is possible to have a month with no revenue, so you have negative gross profit. And that's extremely important because you need to understand that any revenue would have been better, right? So the one reason we don't understand the value of revenue is that we only recognize the cost if we sell something, and we make our overhead costs variable. And if you don't understand what I'm talking about, that means great, you're not in bookkeeping or accounting, or you're not an owner. Let yourself off the hook. You don't need to know all of that. If you do understand what I'm saying and you're struggling with this, just give me a call. Let's find out. I'm happy to talk about this stuff with anybody. I don't have to talk to you to try and sell you anything or do business together. Just let me help you understand how all of this works so that you can see the value in all of that. So again, thank you for asking that question. We got time for another one, and I really can't go into the whole beef jerky recipe thing here, but let me tell you my secret on beef jerky is I put it on the smoker for a couple of hours first before I put it in the dehydrator and get a lot of great flavor out of that. So try that recipe out. Happy to talk how to make beef jerky, or next batch I'm doing in a sous vide, which will be a whole nother discussion. I'll probably start writing blog posts about cooking. Another question here. Let me go through these and see which one I can answer. So I got a question about capital costs. So in your example, the dehydrator was a capital cost. It's an investment. Is that a cost of goods sold? Okay. All right. That's actually a very good question. It's not a cost of goods sold. As a matter of fact, I've been working with a client this week on reclassifying some of their expenses on jobs. A capital cost is something that you're going to spread over time. Likewise, it could simply have been an expense. So the difference between a capital expense and a regular expense is, when do you recognize the expense? A capital expense I will depreciate over time instead of hitting the P&L all at once. A capital expense is a paper expense, even though it is a cash outlay. So you could argue that his second dehydrator was a cost of goods sold, except that he's going to use it continually. So it's very clear that it's going to be an investment. I don't have to recover all the money on the dehydrator the first thing. In fact, we could have built his model with no dehydrator, and he could have been buying jerky from a wholesaler and reselling it, and then making the investment with the hydrator. So he's making his own jerky and thereby reducing his costs. but the cost of the dehydrator doesn't go into the cost of the jerky because it is an overhead cost. It's an investment cost. It would show up as depreciation on his P&L, on his balance sheet. It would be an asset. If he financed it, there'd be a liability for the financing. So we could take you through, and that's one thing we're going to do at the Jumpstart Workshop is we're going to take you through all of these things, not because your bookkeeper doesn't understand this or you, the owner, doesn't understand this, is that your managers don't understand this. I went to business school to learn this stuff. I didn't learn it in business. What I learned in business, I learned incorrectly until I went to business school. So anything that we could do to help our managers understand how financial documents work and the relationship between your profit and loss statement, your balance sheet, your statement of cash flows, we're actually going to build a small business in the production rental industry so that we understand how all of these things work together and what decisions drive us forward. It's going to be a great workshop. I hope you will come. We already have 80 people registered. I think my capacity is 90, so I suggest if you're interested, please register soon. All right, so there we are. I think that's enough for questions today. I've got one more thing I would like to say to everybody. Some final thoughts here on all this. I tell my clients all the time that companies make the money they're designed to make. I often need to show you how your company works so that you understand why you're getting the results that you're getting, because most of you are getting exactly the results that your company was designed to get. We need to design a different company or make some tweaks and processes to get different results. It's very easy for me to see it from the outside because I don't have all of your history. I'm not too close to it, but that's why it works. The other thing that you need to remember is that the market changes even when you don't. There's lots of things going on right now. I've got a workshop we're putting together for next spring that is only for owners, and it is to look at the future, to look around the corner, to process the big macro issues of our business, everything from exclusivity to pricing and how it's going to affect your business in the long range future, the 5 and 10 years out. So the market's changing even if we're not paying attention to it. And then objectivity will dramatically improve your gross profit. The more objective we are about things, the easier it is to sell things, to take on incremental income and know how to convert that into profit. And that's what I'm trying to help all of you with. I want you to understand objectively how your business works. I want you to apply math instead of emotion to making decisions, so that the emotional decisions are a very small part of what we do. I don't want to take that out completely. I don't want to take the human part of what we do out of it because it's what makes us unique and special. But let's don't use emotions where we have math that can get us 90% of the way there. So there's my thoughts. Thank you guys so much for joining me again and hanging out through this webinar. I hope it was valuable to you. Do shoot me some questions. Schedule a call if you'd like to schedule a call. And I will look for you talking to you next time. Watch your email inbox. This archive will be available to you tomorrow to peruse again. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.